The doctor's hands were shaking. I noticed it before I noticed anything else, the way her fingers tightened around my file. The way she didn't look at the ultrasound screen where my baby's heartbeat flickered in soft black and white. That steady, miraculous rhythm was still there, proof of life, proof of me becoming someone's mother. But the doctor wasn't watching it. She was staring at the paperwork. At the name printed neatly at the top, my husband's name. Then, without warning, she turned off the monitor. Just reached over and switched it off mid-exam, the room dropping into a sudden, heavy quiet, like someone had pulled the plug on my entire future. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to speak with you privately right now." My heart slammed against my ribs. Every fear I'd ever had about pregnancy rushed in at once. Defects, loss, things people don't say out loud because saying them feels like inviting them closer. I nodded, numb, my hands already damp with sweat. She helped me sit up, handed me a paper towel to wipe the gel from my stomach, and led me down the short hallway to her office. She closed the door, then she locked it. I actually laughed. A quick, breathless sound that escaped before I could stop it. "Is something wrong with the baby?" I asked. "You can tell me. I can handle it." She didn't answer right away. She sat down behind her desk, pressed her palms flat against the surface like she needed the grounding, and took a slow, deliberate breath. "No," she said finally. "Your baby is fine." I felt my lungs fill again, relief flooding me so hard it almost hurt. Then she looked up at me, and whatever I saw in her eyes made that relief evaporate. "You need to leave your husband today," she said. "Before you go home, get a divorce lawyer first." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. "I'm sorry, what?" Her face was pale, almost gray. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about your marriage." I shook my head, still half smiling, because that's what people do when something makes no sense. "This is crazy. We're having a baby. We're happy." "I don't understand. That," she said quietly, "is exactly the problem." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Her hands were still trembling. As she opened it, I caught sight of medical forms, clinic letterhead, dates highlighted in careful ink. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. "When I saw your husband's name on your chart just now, I recognized it immediately." The room felt smaller with every word. I could hear my own pulse, loud and insistent, like a warning I'd ignored for too long. "I'm so sorry," she went on, "but you need to see this before he knows that you know." She turned the folder toward me. I don't remember how long I sat there reading. Time did something strange, stretched and warped, each sentence landing like a controlled detonation. Bribed clinic staff, switched samples, payments disguised as consulting fees. A donor I had never agreed to. A plan outlined in steps so methodical it felt unreal. I kept waiting for my mind to reject it, to find the flaw that would make everything snap back into place. But instead, the pieces slid together with terrifying precision. The late-night calls, the sudden obsession with my will, the way he'd talked about planning for the future with a hunger that never felt like love. "This can't be real," I whispered. The doctor didn't argue. She just sat there with me, letting the truth settle like ash. By the time I left her office, my hands were steady again. Not because I was calm, but because something cold and clear had taken hold of me. Shock gives way to focus if you let it. And I let it. I drove home carefully, my face neutral, my breathing even. Grant had installed security cameras 2 years ago. At the time, he'd said it was for protection. Now I wondered how often he watched them, how closely he studied me when he thought I wasn't aware. He was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, smiling, leaning against the counter like he'd been standing there practicing. That same easy expression that had fooled me for years. "How was the appointment?" he asked. "Is the baby okay?" I walked over and hugged him, resting my cheek against his chest, feeling his heart beat through his shirt. "Steady, unconcerned, perfect," I said, and meant something very different than he heard. "Everything's absolutely perfect." That night, he slept soundly beside me. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, one hand on my stomach, planning the end of the man who thought he'd already won. Before Grant Mercer became the man I was planning to dismantle piece by piece. He was the man I trusted more than anyone else on the planet. That truth is important. Not because it excuses what he did, but because it explains how thoroughly he succeeded. I didn't fall for a monster. I fell for someone who knew exactly how to appear harmless. We met 4 years earlier at my family's annual charity gala. The kind of event people politely pretend isn't about money while aggressively networking near the bar. The Wilsons had hosted it for decades. Old money, quiet philanthropy, no logos splashed everywhere. I was standing with a glass of mediocre white wine, trapped in a conversation with a man who had already asked about my portfolio before learning my last name. When Grant appeared beside me like a rescue, he made a joke about the jazz band, asked what I was drinking, complained lightly about how uncomfortable tuxedos were. Normal things, human things. He didn't ask where I went to school. He didn't ask about my inheritance. He didn't pretend to be impressed. I'm just here because a colleague bailed last minute, he said with a shrug. I don't even really know what this thing is for. A financial advisor who didn't research the host family of a major charity event should have been my first red flag. At the time, I thought it was refreshing. I was so tired of men who treated my last name like a sum they were trying to optimize. Grant asked about books. We argued lightly about whether character mattered more than ambition. He listened when I spoke, really listened, the way people do when they want to mirror you. Later, I didn't know that then. We dated for a year. Grant was attentive without being suffocating, charming without being flashy. He insisted on paying for dinners, even when I reached for my wallet. He remembered small details, how I liked my coffee, the exact phrasing of a story I'd told months earlier. He sent flowers to my office on stressful days, not grand bouquets, just simple arrangements with notes that said things like, I know today mattered. My mother hated him immediately. Vivian Wilson had practiced estate law for 30 years before retiring. She'd made a career out of reading people who smiled while planning to take advantage of someone else's grief. After she met Grant for the first time, she pulled me aside in the kitchen and lowered her voice. That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes, she said. Something's wrong with him. I laughed, accused her of being overprotective, told her she didn't know him like I did. We argued about it for months, each conversation sharpening until it finally snapped. We stopped talking almost entirely. Birthday texts, holiday pleasantries. Nothing more. I chose my future husband over the woman who raised me. Grant proposed a year later at my grandmother's estate, down by the rose garden she'd planted when she was young. He cried during his vows, tears streaking down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most honest tears he ever shed. Not from joy, from relief. His long game had paid off. We married there too. White tents, summer light, everything perfect. Grant slipped into my life like he'd always belonged there. And for a while, it felt real, comfortable, safe. After 2 years of trying for a baby with no success, we went to a fertility specialist. The diagnosis landed like a blow: severe male factor infertility. Grant's sperm count was almost non-existent. Natural conception wasn't just unlikely, it was essentially impossible. He cried in the car afterward, sobs that shook his shoulders. He apologized over and over, like this was a personal failure he couldn't forgive himself for. I held him, told him we'd figure it out together, that marriage wasn't about biology, that I loved him. What I didn't know was that those tears weren't grief. They were recalculation. IVF with ICSI was our best option. Grant insisted on researching clinics himself, found one he said was perfect, handled all the paperwork. At the time, I was emotionally exhausted, bruised by disappointment and injections and hope that kept breaking. I let him take control because I thought that was what support looked like. The first cycle failed. I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. Grant stayed home with me, held me, whispered that we'd try again. The second cycle worked. 2 pink lines, a heartbeat. Grant was radiant, already talking about nursery colors, about names, about our future. Then, almost casually, he suggested I update my will now that we were a family. I thought it was practical, loving even. Now I understand it was bookkeeping. In the months that followed, small things began to change. Grant started keeping his phone face down. New passwords. I didn't know. Late night calls. He stepped outside to take. He said it was work, client portfolios, restructuring. When I questioned it, his tone shifted just enough to make me doubt myself. You're being paranoid, he said once, smiling gently. It's the hormones. My mother warned me. Pregnancy can do this. I apologized for asking. That's the part people don't talk about, the way manipulation isn't loud at first. It's quiet. It sounds reasonable. It makes you complicit in your own erasure. By the time I noticed how distant he'd become, how often he slept on the far edge of the bed, how every conversation about money ended in tension, I was already trying to convince myself it was normal. Pregnancy changes things, I told myself. Stress happens. Marriage has seasons. What I didn't know was that while I was growing a child, Grant was growing a plan, and every version of the man I thought I married was just a mask designed to make me trust him long enough to ruin me. If someone had asked me then, when my marriage started to feel wrong, I wouldn't have been able to give them a clean answer. There was no single moment, no dramatic shift. It was more like a hairline fracture in glass so thin you only noticed it when the light hit it just right. 4 months pregnant, I kept telling myself that discomfort was normal. My body was changing. My emotions were louder. My sleep was unreliable. Every book I read warned me that pregnancy could distort perception, amplify anxiety, make women suspicious and irrational. Grant reminded me of that often. Too often. The first thing I noticed was his phone. It was always face down. Now, on the counter, on the nightstand, even in the car, tucked into the cup holder like it might bite if it saw daylight. He changed the password without telling me. When I teased him about it, light and joking, he smiled but didn't laugh. Client confidentiality, he said. You know how it is. I didn't actually, but I nodded anyway. The calls started coming late. 11 at night, midnight, once, almost 2 in the morning. He'd slip out of bed quietly, whispering that he didn't want to wake me, and take them in the kitchen or outside on the porch. When he came back, his energy was off, too alert to focused, like his mind was still somewhere else. What was that about? I asked once. Work stuff, he said immediately. Too immediately. Nothing you need to worry about. That phrase lodged itself under my skin. Nothing you need to worry about. It sounded less like reassurance and more like instruction. The late nights multiplied. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. He claimed he was restructuring portfolios, managing high-stakes clients, building something for our future. I tried to be supportive, even proud, but a small, stubborn voice in my head kept asking the same question. What kind of financial advisor works emergency hours on Saturday nights? Then there were the receipts. I found one tucked into the pocket of his jacket while I was doing laundry. A restaurant downtown I'd never been to. $280. Dinner for 2. Another time. A hotel receipt. A boutique place 40 minutes from our house. Conference, he said when I asked. It ran late. It was safer to stay over. Safer than driving 40 minutes home? When I pressed a little harder, his patience thinned. His voice sharpened in a way that made me feel like I'd crossed an invisible line. Daphne, he said once, rubbing his temples. You're spiraling. It's the hormones. My mother warned me about this. Pregnant women get irrational. Please don't turn into one of those wives. The shame hit immediately. I apologized. Again. Around the same time, his interest in my finances intensified. It wasn't sudden. He'd always known about the trust, the house, the inheritance, but now it felt urgent, relentless. We should add me to your trust, he said one evening, stirring pasta he'd barely touched. What if something happens during delivery? I need access to funds for the baby. That's what lawyers are for, I replied gently. He smiled, but his eyes hardened. Power of attorney is common sense. Every married couple does it. Unless you don't trust me, went and said. Then it was the house. My grandmother's house. It's too big for us, he said. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize returns. The man couldn't remember which streaming service had his favorite shows. But I was supposed to hand him control of $2 million. When I said no carefully, calmly, something in him shifted. The warmth disappeared. He grew distant, cold. He slept on the far edge of the bed, claiming I moved too much now. He stopped touching me, blamed my changing body, said he didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded considerate. It felt like rejection. The arguments increased. He'd bring up the trust. I'd refuse. He'd go silent for days. The silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry. Funny how principles seem to expire when dinner does. One night, I woke up and he wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I stood in the hallway unseen. It's almost time, he said. By spring, everything will be settled. He turned and saw me. Hung up instantly. Work emergency, he said. Go back to sleep. I did. Or at least, I lay there pretending to. My best friend Tara came over for lunch a few days later. She watched me make excuse after excuse for Grant, his stress, his workload, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put her fork down. Daff, she said quietly. When's the last time you talked to your mom? I didn't answer. When's the last time Grant was genuinely happy to see you not performing happy, but real? I didn't answer that either. Trust your gut, she said. Something's wrong. I told her she was being dramatic. That night, I didn't sleep at all. By the time I walked into that OB appointment, I was already holding myself together with denial and habit. I wanted to believe my marriage was still solid, that the man I'd chosen wasn't capable of the things my instincts were whispering. I didn't know then that my instincts were late. Grant wasn't just hiding something. He was building a trap, and I was standing right in the center of it, carrying a child who had no idea how close I was to losing everything. Dr. Brennan didn't rush me. That mattered more than I realized at the time. She let the silence stretch while I stared at the documents spread across her desk, each page heavier than the last. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee gone cold. Outside her office, life continued, nurses moving, phones ringing, other women laughing softly over ultrasound photos, but in that locked room, my marriage was collapsing in real time. My sister's name is Molly, Dr. Brennan said finally. She's a nurse at the fertility clinic you used. She came to me 3 weeks ago. I didn't look up. My eyes were stuck on a payment record, a number circled in pen, $30,000. She showed up at my apartment close to midnight, Dr. Brennan continued. She was shaking. She hadn't been sleeping. She said the guilt was eating her alive. Guilt. The word echoed. 7 months earlier, right around the time our second IVF cycle began, Grant had approached Molly at the clinic. Charming, polite, desperate in just the right way. He told her he had a special situation, a private arrangement. His wife didn't know, he explained, but he was using donor sperm because of a genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. It's not dangerous, he'd told her. It's actually better for her. She'll never have to worry. Better. For me. He offered her money. A lot of it. $30,000 for a nurse drowning in student loans, working long shifts for just over $50,000 a year. He made it sound simple, harmless, just paperwork, just discretion. She said she knew it was wrong, Dr. Brennan said quietly. But she also knew her rent was late and her credit cards were maxed out. And your husband was very convincing. Grant's sperm, which couldn't have produced a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with donor sperm. The embryologist was involved too, paid separately. Between them, they altered the chain of custody just enough that the switch went unnoticed. I felt sick. He told them he knew what he was doing, Dr. Brennan said. That whatever arrangements existed between married couples weren't their business. The pregnancy worked. That was the moment Molly broke. She saw the positive result in the system. Dr. Brennan said. She realized there was a woman out there carrying a baby she believed was her husband's, and it wasn't. She couldn't live with it anymore. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs, grounding myself. So, my baby is healthy, she said firmly, and innocent. That word mattered, innocent. But the cruelty didn't stop at conception. Dr. Brennan showed me more documents, emails between Grant and the embryologist. Vague language hiding very clear intent. Payment trails. Burner accounts. Then she told me about the next phases. Grant planned to alter the clinic records after the birth, make it appear the IVF cycle had failed. That way, the pregnancy would seem natural, clean, undeniable. Then, he'd suggest a DNA test, something sweet, sentimental, something to frame in the nursery. When the results proved he wasn't the biological father, something he already knew, he'd accuse me of having an affair. Our prenup had an infidelity clause, $500,000 in penalties, loss of claim to shared property, the ability to sue for emotional damages. He was planning to destroy you, Dr. Brennan said, legally, publicly. I stared at the words infidelity clause until they blurred. He wasn't just framing me. He was weaponizing my pregnancy, my trust, my own body against me. There's more, she said gently. Grant had gambling debts. $180,000, online poker, sports betting, casino trips disguised as conferences. The bribe money over $50,000 had been siphoned from his clients through small, careful transactions designed to avoid detection. He's drowning, Dr. Brennan said. And he was using you as a life raft. Something inside me went very still. Shock had passed. Disbelief too. What remained was clarity. The late nights. The obsession with my money. The rehearsed tenderness. The way he cried in the car when we learned about his infertility, not from grief, but because his plan had just become more complicated. And my mother, that man's smile doesn't reach his eyes. I had chosen him over her. For 2 years, I gathered the papers carefully, stacking them with deliberate precision. I need copies of everything, I said. And I need to speak to your sister. Dr. Brennan nodded. She's ready. She wants to testify. Good. Because I wasn't going to confront Grant. Not yet. I drove home slowly, forcing my face into neutrality. Grant had installed security cameras 2 years ago, claiming it was for safety. I wondered how often he reviewed the footage, whether he watched for cracks. He was in the kitchen when I arrived, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. How was the appointment? He asked. Is the baby okay? I hugged him, felt his arms wrap around me, familiar and foreign all at once. Perfect, I said. Everything's absolutely perfect. That night, I apologized for being paranoid lately. Blamed hormones. Used the same excuse he'd thrown at me for months. I felt his body relax. The tension melted away. He thought he was still winning. I lay awake beside him until 3 in the morning, one hand on my belly, the other curled into the sheets. Grant Mercer thought he was playing chess. He had no idea. I'd already flipped the board. I didn't cry when I left Dr. Brennan's office. That surprised me. I thought grief would come first, sobbing in the car, screaming into the steering wheel, something cinematic and loud. But grief can wait. Shock had already burned itself out, and what replaced it was colder, sharper, almost surgical. I went home, smiled at my husband, ate dinner, laughed at the right moments, and slept beside the man who had planned to erase me. The next morning, after Grant left for work, I called in sick. My voice trembled just enough to sound believable. Pregnancy fatigue, I told my boss. No one questioned it. They never do when you're pregnant. People assume fragility. I let them. Then I drove 2 hours north, far enough that no one from our town would recognize me, far enough that even if Grant checked traffic cameras or credit card logs, it would look like nothing more than a random errand. Her office was above a hardware store. That should have reassured me, but it didn't. The stairwell smelled like dust and old wood, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. The door at the top had no name, just a small brass plate with a number scratched into it. Rosalind Weaver, ex-police detective, 15 years on the force, private investigator now. She looked nothing like what I expected. No trench coat, no cigarette dangling from her mouth. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, gray hair pulled back in a tight knot, glasses perched low on her nose. She wore a cardigan that looked like it belonged on someone's grandmother. Her eyes were not grandmotherly. They were sharp, assessing, unimpressed. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't offer sympathy. She motioned for me to sit and said, "Start at the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So I didn't. I told her about the charity gala, about Grant's charm, about my mother's warning, about the IVF, the pregnancy, Dr. Brennan, the bribery, the gambling debts, the prenup, the plan to frame me for infidelity. Rosalind took notes the entire time. Neat handwriting, no interruptions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "Your husband made a lot of mistakes," she said. I waited. Arrogant men always do. That was it. No gasps, no outrage. Just fact. "Can you help me?" I asked. Her lips curved into something that wasn't a smile. "I already am. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want bloodless destruction." That was accurate. "Give me 10 days," she said. "I'll give you everything." I left her office lighter than I'd felt in weeks. Back home, I became an actress. I apologized to Grant again for being emotional. I asked about his day. I rubbed his shoulders when he complained about stress. I listened to him talk about money like he hadn't tried to steal mine. At night, when he slept, I lay awake planning. Rosalind called on day 4. "Your husband has a gambling problem," she said, as if announcing the weather. $180,000 in debt. Online betting sites, underground poker games, private lenders who don't like waiting. That explained the desperation. Day 7. He's been embezzling from his clients, she said. Small amounts. Over 18 months. About 53,000 total. His firm has no idea yet. I closed my eyes. They will. Oh yes, she said calmly. They will. Day 10. And there's an affair, Rosalind added. 8 months. His assistant. Of course it was. Hotel receipts. Text messages. Photos not explicit, just undeniable. Dinner dates. Weekend conferences. The kind of evidence that doesn't leave room for interpretation. There's more, Rosalind said. This isn't his first time. She told me about a woman in Boston. Caroline Ashford. Family money. Trust fund. 8-month relationship that ended when she discovered financial irregularities. Grant couldn't explain. She was embarrassed, Rosalind said. Didn't press charges. Regretted it ever since. Caroline agreed to talk, to testify, to finally be heard. I hung up and sat very still. Grant Mercer wasn't unlucky. He was practiced. That night, I watched him rehearse smiles in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie, smoothing his hair. I wondered how many women had fallen for that smile before me. Then I made the hardest call of my life, my mother. The phone rang twice before she answered. Daphne? Her voice was cautious, hopeful, like she'd been waiting for this call but didn't want to scare it away. Mom, I said, and my voice broke. You were right, about everything. There was a pause. Then she said, What do you need, sweetheart? No judgment, no victory lap, just love. I cried harder than I had in weeks. Within 48 hours, my mother, retired estate attorney, 30 years of experience, had connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Connecticut and a prosecutor who specialized in fraud. Her efficiency was terrifying and comforting all at once. You don't need to be brave, she told me. You just need to be thorough. I was very good at thorough. Grant had no idea. He still kissed my forehead every morning, still talked about nursery colors, still believed the board was set exactly how he wanted it. He didn't know the pieces were already gone, and the woman who hunts in silence was already closing in. Grant loved an audience. I'd always known that, even before I had language for it. He didn't just enjoy attention, he fed on it. Validation wasn't a want for him. It was oxygen. Every compliment steadied him. Every admiring look reinforced the version of himself he worked so hard to sell. So when I suggested a celebration, a baby moon party at my grandmother's estate, I watched his eyes light up in a way that made my stomach turn. A party? He said, already smiling. That's perfect. Perfect for him, yes. A garden full of witnesses, friends, family, colleagues, his parents, my mother. A setting steeped in old money respectability. A stage big enough for his final act. He had no idea it would also be the place where everything ended. I'll handle everything, I told him lightly. You've been working so hard. All those late nights. He didn't argue. He never did when it came to appearances. Control of the narrative mattered more to him than control of logistics. I coordinated quietly. The police agreed to be present, discreetly stationed in the guest house at the edge of the property. My lawyer arrived early, blending in near the bar. Rosalind positioned Derek Sykes and Molly Brennan where they could step forward when needed. Grant's boss accepted my invitation without question. Caroline Ashford agreed to attend. Standing just outside the main group until the right moment, every document was printed, labeled, and arranged in folders beneath the podium. I slept better the night before the party than I had in months. The Wilson estate looked exactly as my grandmother would have wanted: white tents, fresh flowers, the gardens in full bloom. 50 years of careful cultivation, every rose bush planted with intention, every path worn by generations of women who knew how to survive betrayal. Grant arrived in his best suit, beaming. He worked the crowd like a politician, one hand always finding my belly when cameras appeared. He laughed loudly, clinked glasses, accepted congratulations like he was already the hero of a story he'd written himself. His mother dabbed her eyes. Such a devoted father, she kept telling people. My own mother watched him from across the lawn. Calm, patient, waiting. At 3 o'clock. Right on schedule. Grant did exactly what I knew he would. He pulled me close, arms snug around my waist, voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. You know what would be amazing, he said. A DNA test. Something special for the nursery. Proof of our bond. The murmurs started immediately. Smiles, soft laughter, approval. I hesitated, just enough to make it convincing. Well, if everyone thinks it's a good idea, Grant's grin widened. He thought the trap was closing. Instead, I walked toward the small platform by the fountain. I took the microphone. The sound of my voice cut through the garden like a blade. Thank you all for coming, I said. Today is about family, about truth. Grant's smile faltered for the first time. My husband wanted to reveal something special today, I continued. So I'm going to help him do exactly that. I pulled the first folder from beneath the podium. Grant's face drained of color. We struggled with fertility, I said calmly. Grant's diagnosis meant natural conception was impossible. So we pursued IVF at a clinic he personally selected. I held up the records. These are the original clinic documents. Before anyone had a chance to alter them. The word alter rippled through the crowd. These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm without my knowledge or consent. Gasps. A dropped glass. Grant's mother gripping his father's arm. He paid $30,000 to a nurse. He paid the embryologist. And he paid $15,000 to a donor. I gestured. Derek stepped forward, pale but steady. My husband's plan, I continued, was to wait until after the birth, then suggest a DNA test. When the results proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew, he would accuse me of infidelity. I held up the prenup. Our agreement includes an infidelity clause, $500,000 in penalties, forfeiture of property, lawsuits, public humiliation. Grant found his voice. Daphne, this is insane. You're confused. I'm not finished. The silence was absolute. In addition to corrupting a fertility clinic, my husband embezzled over $50,000 from his clients. His firm is now aware. Grant's boss set his drink down slowly. He has $180,000 in gambling debts. Murmurs turned into shock. And for the past 8 months, he's been having an affair with his assistant. The photographs did the rest. Grant's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered at his feet. Is any of this true? His mother asked quietly. Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Molly stepped forward. I'm the nurse he bribed. I've already given my statement to police. Derek spoke next. I was paid. I didn't know I was part of a crime. Then the officers emerged from the guest house. Grant Mercer, one said evenly. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The handcuffs clicked shut. Grant looked at me one last time, desperation breaking through the performance. Please, he said. We can fix this. I met his eyes. We just did. As they led him away, the gardens fell silent. My mother slipped her arm around me. Your grandmother would be proud, and for the first time since that ultrasound appointment, I breathed freely. The man who thought he'd won had just lost everything. The silence after Grant was taken away felt heavier than any scream. 50 people stood frozen in my grandmother's garden, surrounded by flowers that had bloomed faithfully for decades, never knowing they'd one day witness the public collapse of a man who believed himself untouchable. Champagne bottles sat unopened. Half-finished conversations died in the air. No one knew where to look anymore. Grant's parents were the first to move. His mother sank into a chair as if her legs had simply given up. She stared at the gravel path where the police car had disappeared, her mouth opening and closing, searching for words that didn't exist. His father stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the ground. Shame radiated off him like heat, not anger, not denial, shame. I didn't approach them. I didn't owe them comfort. People began leaving quietly, one by one, murmuring excuses that didn't matter. Some hugged me. Some avoided my eyes. Some looked at me with a new expression, entirely respect mixed with disbelief. The woman they thought they knew had just detonated a life with surgical precision. My lawyer leaned close. The arrest is clean. No theatrics. Exactly how judges like it. Rosalind gave me a single nod from across the lawn. Job done. By sunset, the estate was quiet again. I sat alone on the back steps, shoes kicked off, feet pressed into the cool stone. My mother joined me without speaking, handing me a glass of water instead of champagne. You okay? She asked softly. I think so, I said. I don't feel victorious. Just finished. She smiled. That's how real justice feels. Grant was denied bail the next morning. Flight risk, the judge said. Gambling debts. Financial fraud. Too many reasons to disappear. The news spread fast. His firm launched an internal audit within hours. $53,000 confirmed missing. They filed charges before the week was over. His assistant resigned without notice and vanished from social media entirely. No goodbye email. No apology. Just gone. Caroline Ashford came forward publicly. Her statement hit like a second wave. Same charm. Same promises. Same financial manipulation. Different city. Same man. Prosecutors loved patterns. The case moved faster than anyone expected. Grant stopped calling me after his lawyer explained that every word could be used against him. The silence felt like relief. The divorce was finalized in record time. The prenup clause he'd planned to use against me snapped shut around him instead. Infidelity, fraud, conspiracy. He walked away with nothing because there was nothing left to walk away with. Every asset he claimed was either borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. The man who had once corrected waiters' pronunciation of wine names now wore county-issued clothing and waited for his number to be called. I didn't visit him. I didn't need closure from someone who never saw me as human. 4 months later, my baby was born, healthy, loud, perfect. Some people asked questions about biology, about donors, about whether I'd ever want to reach out. I shut those conversations down quickly. Family isn't DNA, it's presence. It's protection. It's who stays when things are hard. My child had me, had my mother, had a legacy of women who didn't fold when men tried to take what wasn't theirs. That was enough. The house felt different without Grant's shadow moving through it. Lighter, mine. My mother and I rebuilt something quietly. Weekly lunches, long walks, conversations we should have had years ago. She never once said I warned you. One afternoon, I asked her why. She smiled into her coffee. Because watching you dismantle him was far more satisfying. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from safety. The court date for sentencing came and went. Years, not months. Grant Mercer would spend a long time thinking about where his plan went wrong. I spent that time learning how to be still again. How to trust myself. How to raise a child without fear that love came with conditions. Some people wait their whole lives for karma to arrive. I was lucky. Mine showed up with documentation, witnesses, and handcuffs right on schedule. And for the first time, the future felt honest. The mornings came back to me slowly, for a long time after everything ended. I woke up braced for impact, heart racing, muscles tight, waiting for the sound of Grant's footsteps, his voice, the subtle tension that used to live in every corner of my home. Trauma doesn't leave when the threat does. It lingers, checking locks that no longer need checking. Then one morning, I realized I'd slept through the night. No dreams. No jolting awake. Just sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor like it had every right to be there. I made tea in my grandmother's kettle. The one with the small chip in the spout she refused to replace because it still worked just fine. Steam rose slowly, curling into the quiet. I rested my hand on my belly and felt my child move, strong and insistent, reminding me that life does not wait for healing to be complete. It grows anyway. Grant's sentencing happened on a gray Tuesday. I didn't attend. I didn't need to hear the number of years spoken aloud. I already knew what prison would take from him: control, admiration, the illusion of superiority he'd wrapped himself in like armor. Men like Grant don't suffer most from confinement. They suffer from irrelevance. My lawyer called afterward. It's done. That was enough. The Wilson estate began to feel like a home again instead of a battleground. I opened windows, let air move freely, took down the security cameras Grant had insisted on installing. Protection, he'd called it. Surveillance, I now understood. I donated his suits, changed the locks, reclaimed space inch by inch. My child arrived on a rainy morning, loud and furious at the world, lungs strong, fists clenched. As the nurse placed them on my chest, something inside me rewired completely. Not fear, not anger, clarity. This was mine. No schemes, no contracts, no hidden motives, just a life beginning because I chose to keep going. In the quiet weeks that followed, people told me I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt awake. There's a difference. Bravery implies fear overcome. Awakening means you finally see what's been there all along. I thought about the woman I'd been when I met Grant: polite, accommodating, eager to believe love meant compromise. I wasn't weak then. I was entrained. No one had taught me how to recognize manipulation wrapped in charm. Now I knew. My mother came by often, rocking the baby, humming songs her own mother had sung to her. 4 generations of women connected by nothing more than choice and care. You broke the cycle, she told me once. No, I said softly. I remembered who we are. The Wilson women didn't endure quietly. We endured intelligently. Grant Mercer thought he married money. He thought he married access. He thought he married a woman who would fold when pressured, who would accept shame instead of confrontation, who would crumble under the weight of his lies. What he married was a legacy, one that didn't announce itself loudly, one that waited, watched, documented, and then acted. Sometimes I imagine him in that cell, replaying the garden party in his mind. The moment he realized the story wasn't his anymore, that the audience wasn't applauding, they were witnessing his unmasking. He wanted to own my future. Instead, he became a footnote in it. On quiet afternoons, when my child sleeps against my chest, and the house hums with peace, I think about how close I came to losing myself to someone else's narrative. Then I look around at the life I rebuilt from the ashes of his plan, and I know this truth with absolute certainty. He never stood a chance, not because I was ruthless, but because I was prepared. Some men hunt wealth, some hunt power. Grant hunted the wrong woman, and I will spend the rest of my life raising someone who knows the difference between love and control, so the cycle ends here, forever.